All right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Mimoso, the editorial director here at Clarity, and joining me soon will be our Chief Strategy Officer, Grant Geyer. We are going to spend a few minutes talking about our recently published report, Team 82's State of CPS Security 2025 Building Management System Exposures. The report identifies the risks within building management systems, specifically the vulnerabilities and configuration errors that are most exploitable by threat actors. The report was compiled based on an analysis of more than 467,000 BMS operating in more than 500 commercial organizations, including smart buildings, retail warehousing, data centers, and hospitality organizations. More and more of these smart building management systems are coming online every day. And like many newly connected devices and systems, cybersecurity is not always the first priority. So Grant and I will cover the highlights of the report that details the riskiest exposures in BMS. We also invite you to download the report at clarity.com. You'll see the URL here on the crawl at the bottom of the screen. So let's kick this off. Hey, Grant, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Hey, Mike, what's going on?
Back again for another one of these. So let's get it started. Let's table set here. What's your sense for the scale of newly connected BMS, and maybe even cover some of the critical processes that these systems are responsible for?
Yeah, so the data around which are the legacy BMSs and which are new BMSs is a little bit hard to come by, but what the analyst estimates is that there's about 14 billion. The BMS market is about a $14 billion market in 2021, expected to grow as high as 32 billion by 2030. A large portion of this growth is not just the BMS themselves, but also all of the IoT devices that are connected to the BMS systems. Think surveillance cameras, lighting, control panels, HVAC systems, all of the different components that provide essential services within the building. The estimate suggests that by 2030, there'll be about 2 billion BMS-related IoT devices deployed within facilities by 2030. And a lot of them are legacy systems that are being retrofitted with network interfaces for integration into things like energy dashboards, mobile apps, third-party platforms. Now, to your second part of your question about critical processes, it can be everything from HVAC, power and energy management, lighting controls, access controls, physical security, fire and life safety systems. Again, a lot of different things. And the way that I try to think about it, that each of these systems, a couple of decades ago were closed systems. You think CCTV closed circuit? What's happened with Ethernet becoming kind of the de facto standard within buildings is now all of these systems are now connected into the network and connected out to the internet to interface with the vendors that manage them for maintenance reasons, where third parties can come in to do, like building engineers can come in to do maintenance on the building. And the example that I heard, I think really resonated with me, is that in a modern BMS system, if there's a fire in a certain floor in the building or smoke on a certain floor of the building, a smart building can do everything from identify which floor it is, which section of the floor it is, whether it's a chemical fire, an electrical fire. It can turn off the ventilation, turn off the elevators, turn on emergency lighting, and actually call the fire department and alert them to specifics. So these set of interconnected capabilities not only provide things like sustainability and energy efficiency, but can also help pinpoint emergency services.
Sounds like a lot of complexity.
Yeah, and again, the complexity provides a lot of business value, but at the same time, a lot of the complexity also, I think, increases the potential attack surface area for individuals that may try to cause harm to individuals within the building.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we're talking about, some protocols that have some miles on them, or some legacy systems, some Windows front ends for some of this, some of these management interfaces and so forth. And there's your potential attack surface.
Yeah, that's right. The way I try to think about this is, when I first started in OT, I was trying to understand how is OT in a production line different from OT in a building. And within a production line, in traditional OT, disruption, an industrial production line can lead to financial loss. Within BMS, it's a disruption of facility operations, which could impact, comfort. So think temperature increases or decreases. It could impact safety. And all of this doesn't impact the process, like business, like if a production line itself, but it can have an indirect disruption on operations. So think in a hospital, if you can't control the elevators and get patients to surgery, or at a certain humidity level, you can't perform surgery, right? So it can be quite critical in terms of the potential disruption that these could cause.
And is there a particular level of sophistication that would be required to attack one of these systems, for example, or how exposed are they, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, a lot of the the systems that manage them at the end of the day, like there's a lot of IoT devices that are, bus devices that at the IoT level, at the sensor level, but they all kind of lead up to a management console. Many times those exist on Windows devices because they're implemented by building engineering teams or the facility construction teams. Security is not really their first thought. And so there's a lot of legacy systems out there that could be on Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 95. So hence there's kind of like a pretty broad attack surface area. So if the Windows device itself is exposed, of course, all of the KEVs could be exploited on those systems. In addition to that, building management systems use, like broadly speaking, two protocols, one called BACnet, one called KNX. KNX is more popular in Europe. And these protocols, there are secure modes of each of them, but a lot of time they're implemented with the legacy modes that are insecure that don't require any authentication. So anyone, we did some analysis and showed, and I think there are like 23,000 BMS systems that use these legacy protocols. So if you know how to connect to one of these devices, you could, in essence, be authenticated as a user and conduct any changes you wanted on the components of the building management system.
Right. All right. So before we wrap up, obviously, we want to talk a little bit about some of the data points in the report, and I'd love to hear your take on some of them. For example, we talked about KEVs just now, the known exploited vulnerability. 75% of the organizations in the data set that we looked at are running BMS with these KEVs on them. Some of them, a good percentage of them linked to ransomware, another percentage of them poorly connected to the internet. I mean, what do those percentages tell you? Are they surprising at all?
And there's two data points that I like to look at. The percentage of devices that we found that are exploitable and connected to the internet, and also KEVs that are susceptible to ransomware, is actually pretty small. And I think you'll probably talk about that in a second. But even though it's a small percentage, those are present in 75% of the organizations that we looked at. And so I think about it that it's a small number of devices that could be exploited, but man, if someone chose to exploit them, the impact far outweighs those percentages. So I think it's an area that organizations really need to understand to ensure that they can ensure essential services are provided within the building.
Yeah, I mean, and 75% of a pretty decent sample size is pretty indicative of probably what's going on there on a larger scale.
Yeah, and I think it just also talks to the fact that from a governance perspective and a roles and responsibilities perspective, like things like building management systems, they may have a kind of unclear purview of who owns them, who owns security for them. A lot of times IT security teams, I've talked to a lot of hospitals, a lot of the security teams don't even know what the building management systems are, don't know how they operate. It's either unclear governance, unclear ownership, or lack of awareness that they even exist is, I think, some of the key challenges, but I think talks to those high percentages of organizations that have them prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, talk about the relatively low percentage of affected devices. I think we had 5% of devices with KEVs across those organizations and 2% insecurely connected, also with KEVs linked to ransomware. Again, relatively low percentages, but across all those organizations, it's significant.
Yeah. So first of all, just in terms of KEV, like thinking about the number of KEVs, so 5%, when you look at the KEVs in the National Vulnerability Database, in CIS's database, about 50% of the KEVs have known ransomware campaigns associated with them. So that in and of it, that explains kind of the ransomware piece. Internet connected means that, again, it's not unusual for there to be internet connectivity, again, for maintenance reasons. But the key thing is insecure internet connectivity, like being wide open to the internet, I think is the more concerning challenge, given the fact that a lot of these protocols are insecure.
All right, Grant. So let's wrap up and end with maybe 2 or 3 recommendations you have for BMS protection. What should organizations be doing today to limit these exposures?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of it is first of all, it's understanding what's out there. So kind of basic asset inventory, not just focused on the production floor of a plant or, not only our medical devices if you're a hospital, but really kind of understanding a broad understanding of asset inventory to understand where the facilities team has placed these devices, is the first thing. So I guess it's awareness that they're out there. The second is around remote access. A lot of times remote access has been connected to these devices, but the access points can be implemented with things like TeamViewer or PC Anywhere, which have secure modes, but a lot of times they're implemented with just basic username and passwords, with the same username and password across the estate, like default passwords. So I think it's kind of understanding remote access sprawl that may exist within the environment. And I think third is, if you've identified them, ensuring that as much as possible, connectivity is really kind of locked down only to the manufacturer themselves, to specific DNS sites or IP addresses, and if BACnet or KNX are installed, ensuring the secure versions of those protocols are turned on. I think there's a few really basic steps that organizations can take to dramatically reduce the inherent risk associated with building management systems and building automation systems.
Great. All right, Grant, let's leave it there. And for everyone listening, I invite you to download the report at clarity.com. There's a lot more context and perspective there on the numbers that we provide and a lot of recommendations that are important for your organizations. So thanks again for listening, and thanks, Grant. Great to see you again.
Great to see you.
Bye.